The evening my son's security guard looked at his clipboard and told me that my name was not on the guest list. I was standing in the lobby of the Fontaine Grand Hotel in Savannah, Georgia, wearing a dress that I had bought at a department store in Augusta 2 weeks earlier because I did not own anything appropriate for a black tie event, and the specific quality of the moment, the clipboard, the guard's carefully neutral expression, the sound of the string quartet floating from the ballroom down the corridor, was so perfectly constructed for maximum humiliation that I almost admired it. Almost. My name is Adele Christine Beaumont. I am 63 years old. I am the woman who has paid every bill my son Marcus has ever had, from his first pair of soccer cleats in 1992 to the law school tuition that made him the attorney he is today. And I am the woman who worked 2 jobs for 11 years, receptionist by day, seamstress by night, so that Marcus would have the kind of childhood that did not require him to know we were poor. I am the woman who sold my grandmother's jewelry in 2004 so that Marcus could study abroad in Florence, because he had been offered a scholarship that almost covered everything, and the difference was $1,200 that I did not have. I am also the woman who owns the Fontaine Grand Hotel. Not in any name that Marcus would have associated with me, because the hotel was purchased through a holding company that I established in 2016 with the specific advice of my attorney and the specific intention of keeping the purchase discreet, because I was not ready at that point to have a conversation with my son about what I had built and what I owned and why I had spent so many years not telling him about it. That conversation was always coming. I had imagined it as a conversation of my choosing on my terms at a moment I had selected. The moment selected itself, as moments sometimes do, in the lobby of my hotel, with a clipboard and a string quartet and a security guard whose name, I would later learn, was Darius, and who had done absolutely nothing wrong. I want to tell you the full account of that evening, because the full account is what honesty requires, and because there are things about it that I am not proud of, and things about it that I am, and the mixture is what is true. But I need to begin further back. The story of the evening begins with Marcus, and Marcus begins with me. And I begin with a small house in Augusta, Georgia, in 1961, where nothing was guaranteed and everything was possible if you were willing to work for it, with the specific ferocity of someone who has been told it isn't possible. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house in Augusta with my mother and my grandmother and my mother's younger sister, which is 4 women, in 850 square feet, and more love than the square footage should have been able to contain. My father was not present. This is not a story about his absence. I made peace with that absence a long time ago, and I am not going to mine it for the emotional weight that stories about absent fathers are expected to carry. He was not present. My mother was. My grandmother was. My Aunt Cecile was. Between the 3 of them, they taught me everything worth knowing. My grandmother's name was Rose. She had worked as a seamstress her entire adult life, and she had learned the trade from her own mother, and she taught it to me with the specific patience and precision of someone who understands that a skill is a form of security that no one can take from you. By the time I was 14, I could produce work that her clients could not distinguish from hers. By the time I was 18, I had my own small client list of women in the neighborhood who wanted alterations done, and occasionally something made from scratch. My mother worked as a receptionist at a medical practice. She had a high school diploma and the specific dignity of a woman who has decided that her circumstances do not define her and who maintains that decision against daily evidence to the contrary. She was beautiful, and she was kind, and she was harder than anyone I have known before or since. In the specific way of women who have raised children alone and who have learned that hardness is not the same as cruelty, that you can be soft with the people you love and hard with the circumstances that threaten them. Marcus was born in 1984, the year I turned 23. His father and I were together for 4 years and apart for the remaining 40, which is the arithmetic of the situation. When Marcus was 2, his father left, and I became, in the specific tradition of my grandmother and my mother, a woman raising a child alone. I worked 2 jobs, not immediately. In the early years, when Marcus was very small, I worked the medical practice reception job that my mother had moved on from and that I had inherited through her recommendation, and I supplemented it with the seamstress work in the evenings. And when Marcus started school and the evening hours became more reliably available, I added the seamstress work formally, a small studio in the house, word-of-mouth clients, the specific economy of someone who has a skill and uses it completely. The 2 jobs supported us, not comfortably. There were years when comfortable was not a word that applied, but adequately and with specific intention. Every dollar above the cost of our immediate needs went into the savings account I had opened at Wachovia in 1988, and which had a balance of $40 at the time I opened it, and which I never stopped adding to, even in the months when adding to it meant not replacing the shoes that had worn through or the coat that had worn thin. I want to tell you about the saving, because the saving is the part of this account that people tend to find implausible, and the implausibility is worth addressing directly. People find it implausible that a woman working 2 jobs, raising a child alone in a small house in Augusta, Georgia, could accumulate the specific sum that I have accumulated. They find it implausible because the arithmetic seems wrong, because the gap between the income and the outcome seems too large to have been bridged by discipline alone. The arithmetic is not wrong. What it requires is the correct time scale. I saved for 40 years, not always the same amount. There were years of small additions, and years of nothing, and years of genuine progress. But the discipline was consistent, and discipline over 40 years produces results that discipline over 10 years does not. I also had the specific advantage of learning in my 40s how to use money to make money rather than simply to accumulate it. This required that I educate myself in a domain I had not previously understood, which was uncomfortable in the specific way that learning is uncomfortable when you are 43 years old and sitting in a room full of people who are younger than you and better dressed, and who have backgrounds in business or finance that you do not have. I did not let the discomfort discourage me. My grandmother had taught me to sew in rooms where I was the youngest and least skilled person, and I had learned anyway, and the principle transferred. The education came from books first. 3 books on personal finance in 6 months, read with the methodical attention of someone who has decided to understand something completely, and then from Patricia Nguyen, who ran an investment seminar at the Augusta Library in 2002. After the seminar, Patricia answered my questions with the patience of a person who recognizes genuine comprehension seeking, and she became my financial advisor, and she has been my financial advisor for 22 years. In 2008, Patricia identified an opportunity in the Augusta real estate market that the financial crisis had created. I had, for the first time in my life, enough capital to act on it. I bought my first commercial property, then 2 more residential properties, then more, then Savannah. Marcus knew we had been poor. He knew we had not been as poor as some. He did not know what I had built. I want to tell you about Marcus because the story is not a story about a villain, and Marcus is not a villain, and telling the story as though he were would be both inaccurate and a failure of the honesty I have committed to. Marcus is a good man. He is a good man who made a specific wrong choice on a specific night in a specific way that revealed something about the compromise he had made with himself that I had been watching develop for years. The revelation was not a surprise. The particular form it took, the clipboard, the guard, the list, was something I had not anticipated precisely. But the underlying thing, the thing that produced the clipboard and the guard and the list, was something I had seen building for a long time. Marcus grew up knowing we were less than what the families around us had. I had tried to make this fact invisible. The 2 jobs, the saved dollars, the specific management of his wardrobe and his school supplies so that he would not visibly lack what the other children had. I had succeeded in most respects. But children know what is not said as well as what is said. And Marcus knew that the dinners we had were different from the dinners at his friends' houses, and that the car we drove was different from the cars in his friends' driveways, and that the neighborhood we lived in was not the neighborhood that some of his school friends came from. He did not, as a child, seem troubled by this. He was, and I say this as his mother, who has the particular clarity about her child that only mothers have. He was genuinely good, warm and funny and curious about everything, and the kind of child who read for pleasure and who could talk to any adult as though the age difference were irrelevant. He had his grandmother's ease with people and my stubbornness and the specific quality of his own self that was not mine or anyone else's. What changed was Isabel. Isabel Hargrove is the woman Marcus married on the evening I am describing, the evening of the clipboard and the string quartet and the Fontaine Grand Hotel. She is 34 years old, the daughter of a family in Savannah that has had money for 3 generations, the kind of money that no longer needs to be accumulated and has become simply the context in which the family operates. She is not a bad person either. She is a person who grew up in a specific world and who has organized her life around the maintenance of that world's expectations, which includes the expectation that the people who appear in the important events of her life look like what she wants her life to look like. I did not look like what Isabel wanted her life to look like. I am 63 years old, and I have spent 63 years wearing what I could afford and what suited me, and not what the occasion required by the standards of the world Isabel inhabits. I had the department store dress and the shoes that were good, but not what you wear to a black tie wedding at the Fontaine Grand Hotel, and I had the specific appearance of a woman whose money, if she had any, was not visible. Marcus had not told Isabel the truth about me, not the full truth, not about the 2 jobs, not about the sacrifice, not about what I had built. He had told her a version, that his mother was a seamstress in Augusta, that they were not close, that she was independent in the way that Southern families use the word, when they mean the specific independence of someone who does not require social management, because she does not exist in the social world that requires managing. I want to say something about how this happened because it did not happen all at once. It happened gradually through the specific accumulation of small decisions, each of which seemed defensible in the moment. He had not introduced me to Isabel as a seamstress who had worked 2 jobs to put him through school. He had introduced me as my mother in Augusta. He had not invited me to the engagement party, which was held at the Hargroves' house, because I understood later he had been uncertain about what I would wear and how I would present, and what Isabel's family would think. He had sent me photographs instead, which arrived in a text message with the caption, "Engagement party, wasn't she beautiful?" and which I had looked at for a long time before I replied. He had not put my name on the list. He had not put my name on the list. I purchased the Fontaine Grand Hotel in 2016 through Adelaide Holdings, LLC, which is the holding company that Patricia and I established in 2015, when the portfolio had grown to a size that required a more formal legal structure. The hotel was not my first real estate purchase. I had been buying commercial and residential properties in the Augusta area since 2008, when Patricia identified the opportunity in the post-crisis market, and I had the capital to act on it. But it was the largest and the most deliberate. The Fontaine Grand was listed for sale in 2016 after its previous ownership group had overextended in a renovation project that exceeded their financing. It was a beautiful property, a late Victorian building in Savannah's historic district that had been a hotel in various forms since 1897, and that had the specific quality of a place that has survived long enough to have character. The renovation the previous owners had undertaken had been architecturally excellent and financially ruinous, and the distressed sale offered the kind of opportunity that my 40 years of patience had been building toward. Patricia and I looked at the financials for 3 weeks. Then I bought it. The hotel's management remained in place through the transition. I had no interest in operating a hotel personally, and every interest in having the people who knew how to operate it continue doing so. My role was owner. The silent majority interest in Adelaide Holdings, LLC, touched with Patricia's firm, handling the day-to-day relationship with the management team. The hotel's staff and its guests had no reason to know who owned it. The management company knew. The legal and financial professionals knew. No one else. I want to say something about the specific quality of those 8 years of silent ownership, because they were not passive years. I was engaged with the hotel in the way that a responsible property owner is engaged. The capital decisions, the major renovations, the review of the management company's annual performance, the strategic conversations with Thomas about where the property needed to go over the next 3 to 5 years. I attended 1 meeting per quarter in person, which required me to be in Savannah, which I found genuinely pleasant. I like Savannah. I have always liked Savannah, the specific quality of a city that has managed to be both very old and very alive. In those 8 years, I sat in the library suite of my hotel and had coffee and read the business reports that Thomas prepared and made decisions about the investment and the direction. I was, in those hours, entirely myself. The woman who had started with $40 at Wachovia and had built this through 40 years of patience and discipline and the specific education that Patricia had provided. I was not performing anything. I was simply present in what I had built. Why had I not told Marcus? This is the question that everyone asks, and it is the right question, and I want to answer it honestly. I had not told Marcus because I had not yet arrived at the right moment to have the larger conversation that the disclosure would require. And the larger conversation was not simply, I own a hotel. The larger conversation was about 40 years of 2 jobs and saved dollars and the specific ferocity of a woman who decided that her circumstances were not her destination, and about why I had kept this building quiet for so long, and about what I wanted the knowledge to mean for our relationship rather than simply for his inheritance calculations. I had been preparing for the larger conversation for years. I had written outlines for it on legal pads. I had rehearsed versions of it in the car on long drives. I had consulted Patricia about the timing. The conversation was always soon. It was always when the moment is right. The moment that presented itself was not the moment I had chosen. Marcus had come to me 4 months before the wedding and told me about the venue. That he had told me, with the specific, careful manner of a man who has decided what to say and is saying it, that Isabel's family had selected the Fontaine Grand Hotel for the reception, that it was an exceptional venue, that everything was being handled by the Hargrove family's event coordinator, and that I would receive my invitation through the proper channels. Through the proper channels. I had listened to this, and I had thought, he does not know. He genuinely does not know that he is telling his mother, who owns this hotel, that she will receive her invitation through the proper channels. And I had made a decision, wrong in retrospect, or at least incomplete, not to tell him. I wanted to see what the proper channels would produce. I wanted to see what he had decided about me. Because what the proper channels produced was the absence of my name from the list. I arrived at the Fontaine Grand Hotel at 7:15 on a Saturday evening in October. The hotel was lit beautifully. The exterior lights had been arranged by the event coordinator with specific attention to the Victorian facade, and the entrance was flanked by arrangements of white flowers that I recognized as the work of a florist in the historic district who had done work for the hotel before. The lobby was busy with wedding guests arriving, and with the hotel's regular guests navigating around them, and the string quartet was playing something that I could not immediately identify, something baroque, precise, and warm. The lobby of the Fontaine Grand has a specific quality in the evening that I have always loved. The light from the chandeliers catches the plasterwork on the ceiling, and the original heart pine floors have the warm glow of wood that has been loved for a long time, and the whole space has the quality of a room that is pleased to be in use. I crossed the lobby to the entrance of the ballroom corridor, where 2 security guards stood beside a long table with clipboards. Other guests were arriving at the same time, and the guards were checking names with the professional efficiency of people who do this regularly. I waited my turn. When I reached the front, the guard, Darius, as I would learn later, a young man of perhaps 25 who had worked security at the hotel for 2 years and who was doing precisely what his instructions required, looked at me and asked my name. Adele Beaumont, I said. He looked at the list. He looked at the second page. And he looked at a third page that appeared to be a supplementary list. Then he looked at me with the specific, carefully neutral expression of a person who has to deliver information that is going to be unwelcome. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see your name here. I'm Marcus Beaumont's mother, I said. He looked at the list again. He was being thorough. He was trying to find me. I don't have a Beaumont on this list. The guest names are... He stopped himself professionally. I'm sorry, your name isn't on the list. I stood at that table for a moment. I want to describe what the moment felt like, because the feeling is part of the account. It was not simple humiliation, though humiliation was present. It was a specific compound of things. The humiliation, yes, and underneath it a specific clarifying recognition. And I had spent years wondering whether Marcus knew what he had, whether he understood the cost of what I had given him, whether the compromise he had made with himself about who I was and what I was worth was as deep as I feared. The clipboard answered the question. It answered it publicly in the lobby of my hotel, with other guests nearby and the string quartet playing Baroque music down the corridor. I took a breath. I thought about my grandmother Rose, who had taught me to sew because a skill is a form of security that no one can take from you. I thought about my mother who had maintained her dignity against daily evidence to the contrary. I thought about 40 years of 2 jobs, and Patricia and the Wachovia account that had started with $40. Then I took out my phone. The person I called was not Marcus, and the person I called was the hotel's general manager, whose name is Thomas Reeves, who has been managing the Fontaine Grand since before I bought it, and who knows, as a matter of operational necessity, who owns the property he manages. Thomas, I said when he answered, it's Adele Beaumont. I'm in the lobby. I'm going to need access to the ballroom. There was a brief pause. Then Thomas said, Mrs. Beaumont, of course. I'll be right down. While I waited, I looked at the lobby, the chandeliers, the plasterwork, the heart pine floors, the white floral arrangements that I had not ordered, but that were appropriate, the string quartet still playing Baroque music. Mine. All of this was mine. Thomas Reeves appeared in approximately 4 minutes, which was faster than I had expected, and told me that he had been monitoring the evening's events with the attention that a general manager gives to a large private event in his hotel. He is 51 years old, with the specific capable calm of someone who has managed a historic hotel for 20 years and who has developed over those years the ability to assess a situation and respond to it without telegraphing his assessment to everyone in the room. He came to me at the table, nodded to Darius with a brief expression that communicated, "Stand down," and said, "Mrs. Beaumont, good evening. Shall we step to the side?" We stepped to the side. "The event is in full swing," he said. "Cocktail hour is in the Palmetto Room. Dinner will begin at 8. The ceremony was at 4 this afternoon at the cathedral, so the celebration is what's here tonight." "I know," I said. "Your name was not provided on the guest list by the event coordinator," he said, with the specific professional neutrality of someone who is providing information without editorializing. "I know that too," I said. "Thomas, I need to be in that ballroom. I need to be there before the dinner speeches begin." He looked at me for a moment. The dinner speeches are scheduled for 8:30. Then I have 45 minutes, I said. What do you intend to do? I thought about this for a moment. I had not fully planned what I intended to do, which is unlike me. I am a planner. I have been a planner since the Wachovia account and the first Patricia Nguyen seminar. But the specific nature of this evening had not produced a plan. It had produced a recognition, and the recognition had produced a resolve, and the resolve was going to have to find its form when I was in the room. I'm going to speak, I said. Thomas was quiet for a moment. To Marcus? To the room, I said. Another moment of quiet. Thomas is a man who has managed a historic hotel for 20 years and who has developed the ability to assess a situation without telegraphing his assessment. He assessed this one. I'll need to brief the event staff, he said, and I would strongly suggest not disrupting the cocktail hour. Let them sit down for dinner and let the first course be served. It will be easier to speak to a room that is already settled. That's sensible, I said. In the meantime, he said, may I suggest the library suite? It's quiet and comfortable, and you'll have access to whatever you need. He took me to the library suite, which is one of the hotel's small private rooms on the second floor. A room with a fireplace and built-in bookshelves, and the specific quality of a space designed for quiet thought, which is, I've always found, the most accurate reflection of what a good hotel is actually for. I sat in the library suite for 40 minutes. I thought about Marcus. I thought about what I wanted to say. I thought about the specific quality of the choice I was about to make, which was permanent in a way that most choices are not. Once I walked into that room and took the microphone, there was no unwalking. The hotel was going to be known. The list was going to be explained. Everything was going to change. I thought about whether I wanted that. And then I thought about the clipboard and Darius's carefully neutral expression, and the string quartet playing Baroque music while I stood in the lobby of my hotel and was told that my name was not on the list. I was ready. Thomas briefed me on the room as we walked from the library suite to the corridor outside the ballroom. 214 guests, round tables of 10, the Hargrove family at the head table with Marcus and Isabel. The first course, a shrimp bisque, had been served. The second course would come at 8:15. The speeches were scheduled for 8:30. The microphone is a standing mic near the dance floor, he said. It's live throughout the dinner. When the speeches begin, the DJ will hand it to whoever is speaking first. Who's speaking first? Isabel's father, he said. I'll go before him, I said. Thomas opened the ballroom door. I want to describe the ballroom of the Fontaine Grand on that October evening, because it was beautiful, and because beauty is worth noting even in moments of difficulty. And the room had been dressed with a combination of the hotel's existing decor, the original crown molding, the crystal chandeliers that had been in the room since the 1940s renovation, the parquet dance floor that had been relaid in 2018 during the renovation I had funded, and the event coordinator's additions, white and gold table arrangements, candlelight, the specific warmth of a room that has been carefully prepared for a celebration. 214 people in evening clothes, the low murmur of conversation, and the gentle sound of silverware on china. I had not seen the ballroom dressed for a large event before. I had seen it empty and in mid-renovation and in its ordinary hotel configuration for smaller gatherings. I had not seen it like this. It was exactly what I had hoped for when I bought the property. And it was exactly what the renovation had been designed to produce. And it was being used for my son's wedding, which I had not been invited to. I walked in. Thomas stayed at the door. The room was not immediately aware of my entrance. I was wearing a department store dress and flat shoes, and I did not look like someone making an entrance. Several tables near the door looked up briefly and returned to their conversations. The tables further in did not notice. I walked to the dance floor. The standing microphone was there, as Thomas had said, a standard hotel-quality standing mic with a clean signal. I picked it up. The act of picking up the microphone produced a feedback squeak that silenced the room immediately, which is the specific way that feedback silences rooms. Not gradually, but all at once. 214 faces turned toward me. I looked at the head table. Marcus was there in a black tuxedo, with Isabel beside him in white, and the Hargrove family arranged around them, with the specific composed quality of people who have managed social events for 3 generations, and who are currently composing themselves against the intrusion of an uninvited woman in a department store dress who is holding the microphone. Marcus's face was doing several things simultaneously. I recognized all of them. "Good evening," I said into the microphone. My voice was steady. I had not entirely expected it to be steady. "My name is Adele Christine Beaumont. I am Marcus Beaumont's mother. I was not on the guest list tonight, but I'm here because there is something that needs to be said before this evening goes any further. I want to reproduce what I said as accurately as I can, because accuracy is what the account requires, and because I had not prepared a speech, and what I said was what was true rather than what was crafted. I'm going to apologize first, I said, to Isabel's family, and to the guests who are here to celebrate a wedding, and who did not expect this interruption. What I am about to say is something that should have been said privately, and it was not said privately, because the circumstances didn't allow for that. I'm sorry for the disruption." A pause. The room was silent in the specific way of a room that is waiting. "Marcus," I said, looking at the head table, "I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you some things for a long time. The moment I had imagined was quieter and more private than this one. But the moment I actually have is this one, and I'm going to use it." I could see Marcus's hands on the table. They were flat on the tablecloth, very still. "When you were 7 years old," I said, "I sold my grandmother's silver hairbrush set, the one she had brought from her mother. That was the only valuable thing in our house. Because you needed new soccer cleats, and I didn't have enough for both the cleats and the electricity bill. I chose the cleats because I believed you needed to be a boy who could play soccer with his friends more than you needed to come home to a lit house. And I thought the electricity company would give us another week, which they did. You were 7. You didn't know about the hairbrushes. You played soccer every Saturday that fall, and you were excellent at it. And I sat on the sideline in a coat that was 2 years too old, and I was happy." The room was absolutely still. "When you were 14, your school had a trip to Washington, D.C. It cost $340. I didn't have $340. I took on 3 extra clients for 2 months. I was a seamstress in the evenings, which you knew about, and I made the $340, and I drove you to the school parking lot at 5 in the morning, and I watched the bus pull away, and I went home, and I cried because I was proud of you, and because I was exhausted, and because both of those things were true at the same time. I could see that Isabel was crying. This surprised me. When you were 20, I said, you asked me not to come to your first law school graduation ceremony. You said it would be too far and too expensive, and both of those things were true, and I let you say them. What I did not say is that I had already arranged the time off from work, and that I had saved the money for the bus ticket, and that I spent the evening of your graduation in my kitchen in Augusta, eating the dinner I had cooked to celebrate alone, because I could not tell you that I had been planning to come without making you feel guilty for asking me not to. I paused. You are welcome to feel guilty about that now if you'd like. You have 20 years of accumulated opportunity. There was a small sound from somewhere in the room that might have been a surprised laugh. When you were 23, I said, you told me that you were embarrassed to bring friends to our house. You said this in passing, not intending to wound. I know that. You said it the way you say things at 23. That you haven't yet understood the weight of. I didn't say anything at the time. I have been thinking about it for 16 years. Marcus had put his face in his hands. I'm not here tonight to shame you, I said. I'm here because I need you to know something, and I need the people in this room to know it too, because some of what happened tonight was produced by the specific version of me that you have presented to this room, and that version is not accurate. I paused. The room waited. I own this hotel, I said. The quality of the silence changed. 214 people recalibrated something simultaneously. I purchased the Fontaine Grand Hotel in 2016 through a holding company. I have owned it for 8 years. The renovation you are currently enjoying, the chandeliers, the floors, the ballroom you are sitting in. I funded that renovation. The staff who have been serving you tonight work for me ultimately through the management company I retained to operate the property. The event coordinator your family hired, I said, looking now at Isabel's father, who was very still, contracted with my hotel. I let this land. I'm also paying for this wedding, I said. Not directly. The Hargrove family contracted with the hotel and will receive an invoice that they will pay. But the money from that invoice comes to me. I have been, from the beginning of this evening, the sponsor of the celebration of my son's marriage, and to which I was not invited, whose guest list did not include my name. I want to be precise about what happened next, because precision is what honesty requires, and because what happened next was not what I had expected. I had expected Marcus to be defensive. He is 40 years old, and he is a lawyer, and he has spent 20 years being the most capable person in every room he enters, and the specific combination of those things produces, in men like Marcus, a reflex of defense when they are cornered. I had expected the reflex. What I saw instead was a man who had removed his face from his hands and who was looking at me from across the ballroom with an expression that I had not seen on his face since he was 8 years old. The expression of a child who has done something wrong and knows it, and is not trying to manage the knowledge, but simply having it. He stood up. "Mom," he said, and his voice carried without the microphone, in the specific way of a room that is completely quiet. He stopped. He was, I could see, doing the thing that he does when he is working toward honesty, and the working is hard, the specific stillness that precedes the thing being said. I should have told her, he said, not to me, to Isabel, to the room. I should have told her about you. I didn't because, another pause, longer this time, because I was ashamed, not of you. I've been trying to work out for a long time what I was ashamed of, and I think the answer is that I was ashamed of my own embarrassment, of having been the kind of person who could be embarrassed by his mother. I thought if I kept those two parts of my life separate, the embarrassment would... He stopped again. Isabel had taken his hand. This was the moment I revised my assessment of Isabel Hargrove, which had not been generous. She was looking at him with the specific quality of a person who is hearing something they did not know they needed to hear, and who is receiving it without flinching. I don't care about the hotel, Marcus said. He looked at me directly. I mean, I care about the hotel. Obviously, I care about the hotel. But that's not... He shook his head. Mom, you stood in the lobby of your own hotel and they told you your name wasn't on the list. Because of me. Because of a choice I made that I didn't have the... He stopped a third time. And this time, what he was stopping against was clearly emotion rather than words, because the words were there, but the emotion had arrived ahead of them. He came around the table. He walked across the ballroom toward me. I stood at the microphone. When he reached me, he said quietly enough that only I could hear it, "I'm sorry, Mama." He had not called me Mama since he was 6 years old. I stood very still for a moment. Then I said also quietly, "I know." I handed him the microphone. I said in the beginning of this account that I walked onto the stage and took the microphone and told the party that it was over, and told everyone to pack their bags and leave my hotel. I want to be honest with you. This is not exactly what happened, and I prefer accuracy to the more satisfying version. What happened was what I have described. I stood at the microphone and said what needed to be said, and Marcus stood up and said what he needed to say. And I handed him the microphone and I went to find a table. The party did not end. The party continued after a specific and necessary pause, in the way that good parties continue when something difficult has been faced in the middle of them, with a quality of genuine warmth that was not present before the difficult thing was faced. The dinner service resumed. The speeches happened. There were 4 of them, a toast by the best man, who is a friend of Marcus's from law school, and who acquitted himself well given that he had just watched something happen that was not in his prepared remarks. A toast by Isabel's father, who was composed in the way that people who are accustomed to difficult public moments are composed, and who said something brief and graceful. And then Marcus. Marcus's speech was not the speech he had prepared. I know this because Philip, the best man who had seen the prepared version, told me afterward that the prepared speech was a standard wedding speech, warm and specific and appropriate, and that what Marcus actually said was something different entirely. What Marcus actually said, standing at the head table with the microphone, with 214 people still in the room because not one of them had moved during the pause, and none had moved since, was this: I have been thinking for the last 20 minutes about who I am, and I think what I have realized is that I have been trying to answer that question for a long time by looking at where I am, the career, the city, the address, the firm. And tonight my mother walked into a room I didn't invite her to and told me something true about where I came from. And I think the answer to who I am is actually much simpler than I have been making it. I am the son of Adele Beaumont, who worked 2 jobs, who saved money for 40 years, who sold her grandmother's hairbrushes and never told me, who cooked herself a celebration dinner alone when I asked her not to come to my graduation. He stopped. He looked at me. And who owns this hotel, which is a detail I am still processing. There was a sound in the room that I can only describe as the collective exhale of 214 people who had been holding something. "Isabel," he said, "I should have told you all of this a long time ago. I should have been proud of where I came from the beginning. And I wasn't, and that is on me, and I am going to spend however long it takes making it right." He paused. "And, Mom, I'm sorry. I have a lot of things to be sorry for. I'm starting with the guest list." I sat at a table near the back, not a head table seat, not a seat of honor, a regular table near the back where a woman named Dorothy Hargrove, Isabel's maternal aunt, had made room. Dorothy is 68 years old, and she had the specific quality of a woman who has seen a great deal and is no longer surprised by any of it. She handed me a glass of champagne and said, "That was necessary." I told her I agreed. Thomas had arranged for a place setting to appear at the table, and the shrimp bisque arrived, and it was very good. The hotel's kitchen, under its current chef, had been producing excellent food for 3 years, and the bisque reflected this. I ate my bisque. I listened to the music. I watched my son be married. The title of this account says that I told the party it was over. What I actually said at the end of my speech, before the moment with Marcus that I have described, was this: "I am going to go now and let this evening continue. Because tonight is not about me, and it was always going to be about Marcus and Isabel, and I hope it is a wonderful evening." I had intended to leave. I had prepared myself to leave. Dorothy Hargrove had not prepared herself to let me leave. "You sit down," she said, with the specific authority of a woman of 68 who has decided something. "This is a family occasion. You are his mother. You sit down and you have your soup." I sat down. I had the soup. It was, as I said, very good. Marcus called me the next morning at 8 o'clock. He and Isabel were in the hotel. I had arranged for a complimentary suite through Thomas the previous evening, which was the least the property owner could do for the couple whose wedding had just been significantly rearranged. He said, "Can I come up?" I said, "I'm in room 412. He came up in 10 minutes, which told me he had not slept well and had been waiting for it to be a reasonable hour. He knocked. I let him in. The room was a standard suite, good by any objective measure, the kind of room that a careful renovation produces when the renovation is done, with attention to both the historic fabric and the contemporary guest's needs. I had stayed in it once before, shortly after the renovation was completed, to assess the result. I had thought it was very good. I still thought so. We sat at the small table by the window. The window looked out over the historic district, the specific morning quality of Savannah in October, the live oaks with their Spanish moss, the mild light, the particular quiet of a Saturday morning in a historic city. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "You owe me an apology," I said. "The explanation can come later, or not at all. I understand more than you think." He looked at me. "I know why you kept me separate," I said. "You wanted something I didn't have. Not the money, though that too, I suppose, but mostly not the money. You wanted the world that came with it, the world where the family looks a certain way and moves in certain circles and presents certain things. You married into that world, and you were afraid that I would not fit." "It's not that you wouldn't fit," he said. You are the most capable person in any room. It's that I was afraid of what the room would think, which is worse." "Yes," I said, "it is." A silence. "The hotel," he said. "The hotel," I agreed. "How long have you known you were going to tell me?" "I've been preparing to tell you for years," I said. "I wanted the right moment. I was wrong to wait for the right moment. There is no right moment for certain kinds of truth. You either tell them, or you wait until a wrong moment forces the telling." "Like a security guard with a clipboard," he said. "Like a security guard with a clipboard," I agreed. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Isabel wants to meet you properly. She met you last night, obviously, but she wants to have a conversation, a real one." "I would like that," I said. "She said you were the most impressive person in the room last night. She said it to me, not to you, which means she meant it." "The most impressive person in the room," I said, "was Isabel, for the way she held your hand when you stood up. That takes something." He looked at me. Something crossed his face that I recognized from when he was small, the specific expression of a person who is assembling a revised picture of something they thought they understood. "Mom," he said, "the hotel. What else?" And so I told him. All of it. The Wachovia account with $40, Patricia Nguyen, the Augusta properties, the portfolio, the holding company, the full picture delivered as I had always intended to deliver it, not as an inventory of wealth, but as a biography of work, which is what it actually is. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a horse-drawn carriage moved slowly along the street below, the specific Savannah tourist ritual that I have always found both charming and a little sad. The September morning light came through the live oaks, the way it does in October in the South, golden and specific, and already telling you that the year is turning. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "You owe me an apology," I said. "The explanation can come later, or not at all. I understand more than you think." He looked at me. Then he said slowly, building toward something, "I was ashamed, not of you. I've been trying to work out what I was ashamed of, and I think I was ashamed of having wanted to be different from what we were. And once I started wanting it, I couldn't stop. And then I married into a family where being what I wanted was possible, and the cost was keeping the two worlds separate, and that cost seemed manageable." "Until last night," I said. "Until last night," he said. A silence. Then, "I keep thinking about the hairbrushes." "You weren't supposed to know about the hairbrushes," I said. "I know. That's exactly it. There were 100 things I wasn't supposed to know about. You protected me from all of them, and I managed to not think about where the protection came from. And not thinking about it became not seeing it, and not seeing it became last night." "Marcus," I said, "you not seeing it was the whole point. I did not want you to be the boy who knew how close the margin was. I wanted you to be the boy who went to Washington and Florence and law school without a gap year. That was what I was building, and I succeeded. And the cost of succeeding is that you didn't have to think about the cost, and not thinking about it became what it became. He was very still. Then, Mama, tell me about the hotel. Tell me the whole story of how it happened. I want to know all of it. He listened for 2 hours. Marcus and Isabel flew to Italy for their honeymoon on Monday. Before they left, Isabel came to the hotel. I had stayed an additional night because Thomas had asked me to look at a maintenance situation on the 3rd floor, which is the kind of thing owners do, and we had coffee in the library suite. Isabel is not who I had decided she was, which is a statement I need to make clearly, because my assessment of her had not been generous, and my generosity had been as premature and as wrong as Marcus's. She had grown up in a world of certain expectations, yes. She had participated in the specific management of appearances that world produces, yes. She had been complicit in the event coordinator's creation of a guest list that did not include the groom's mother, yes. She was also the woman who had taken Marcus's hand when he stood up, and she was in the library suite over coffee, someone different from the category I had placed her in, attentive, specific in her attention, genuinely sorry in a way that was not managed, but simply present. She said, I want to understand your story. Marcus has told me some of it, but I think he has told me the version that is easiest for him to tell. I want the real version. I told her the real version over 2 hours of coffee. Not everything. The full version takes longer than 2 hours. But enough. Augusta. My grandmother Rose. My mother. The hairbrushes. The soccer cleats. The seamstress work. The $40 at Wachovia. Patricia Nguyen. The properties. The hotel. She listened with the specific quality of someone for whom this story is genuinely new. Not the category of difficult origin story that should inspire respect, but the actual specific content of an actual specific life. When I finished, she said, Why didn't you tell Marcus sooner? Because I was afraid, I said. She looked at me. This was not the answer she expected. Afraid of what? That he would love me more for what I had built than for who I am, I said. That the money would become the reason he was proud of me, instead of the other things, the things that don't have a balance sheet. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, He was already proud of you for the other things. He just hadn't said it. No, I said, he hadn't. He will now, she said. I believed her. I want to close this account with the thing I have been thinking about since the evening in the ballroom, which is the question of what was owed and what was paid. Marcus owed me the acknowledgement that he has not yet fully given and is in the process of giving. The acknowledgement that I exist, that I am his mother, that the life I built to give him what he has was a life of specific labor and specific love, and that neither of those things is invisible even when the circumstances make them look invisible. This acknowledgement is in progress. I believe it will complete itself. Relationships between parents and children are not events. They are processes. And the process between Marcus and me is in a better state than it was before the clipboard and the Baroque string quartet. I owed Marcus the truth about what I had built, which I had withheld for too long for reasons that were understandable, but not entirely good. The truth has now been told. He has heard it. He is doing what people do when they hear a truth that reorganizes something. He is processing it, sitting with it, assembling the revised picture. This takes time. I have time. What neither of us owed anyone was the version of the story in which I am only the seamstress from Augusta, and he is only the son who was embarrassed by her. We are more than that. We have always been more than that. The evening in the ballroom made this visible in a way that could not have been managed or scheduled or delivered on the legal pad I had been filling with outlines. My grandmother Rose taught me that a skill is a form of security that no one can take from you. She was talking about sewing. She was also talking about everything else. The skill of patience, the skill of attention, the skill of knowing what you are building toward, even when you are only $40 into the building. Never be ashamed of the person who gave you everything. This is the meaning that the story is supposed to carry, and I want to say it directly. Do not be ashamed of the person who did the work before you arrived at the position that makes the work invisible. The work is not invisible to the person who did it. It is the whole of what they are. I am Adele Christine Beaumont. I own a hotel. I make soup when the person in front of me needs it. I have always been both of these things, and the second one was the more important one for every year of the first one. Marcus is going to learn this. He has already started. I want to say one more thing. And then I will close this account. The story of that Saturday evening will be told among the guests who were present for a long time. I know this. 214 people were in the room, and the story is the kind of story that travels. A woman in a department store dress picking up a microphone in a ballroom where she was not invited and revealing that she owned the room. It is an excellent story. It is also, in some versions that will circulate, a story about triumph and reversal and the specific satisfaction of watching the powerful face and unexpected accounting. I want to say that this is not what the evening was about. From the inside. From the inside, the evening was about a mother and a son, and about 40 years of work that had been invisible to the person it was done for, and about the specific moment when the invisibility became visible, not because of the hotel, not because of the holding company or the Adelaide Holdings, LLC, or any of the financial structures that Patricia and I had built, because of a clipboard and a guard and a name that was not on the list. The clipboard broke something open. What broke open was not my dignity. My dignity was intact. It has been intact through things considerably more difficult than a security guard at a ballroom door. What broke open was the specific silence I had been maintaining about who I am and what I have built. The silence that I had maintained for years because I was waiting for the right moment, because I was afraid of what the knowing would do, because I had not been ready to have the conversation. I am ready now. Marcus is ready now. My grandmother Rose would have found all of this, the hotel, the ballroom, the microphone, both excessive and entirely appropriate. She would have said, the skill got you here, all the skills, the sewing and the saving and the patience and the specific ferocity of a woman who has been told her circumstances are her destination and who has decided otherwise. She would have been right. Never be ashamed of the person who gave you everything. I am Adele Christine Beaumont. I am the seamstress from Augusta. I own a hotel. I raised a son who is learning now that both of these things are the same woman, and that the woman is worth knowing. He has already started. I want to add something that I have not yet said in this account. The morning after the ballroom, before Marcus came up, and before Isabel came to the library suite, I sat in room 412 alone for about an hour with my coffee and the October morning outside the window. I was sitting with the specific quality of the aftermath of something large, not triumphant, just sitting with what had happened. What I kept returning to was the moment in the lobby, not the clipboard and the list, but the moment just before that, when I had stood in the entrance of the Fontaine Grande and looked at the chandeliers and the plasterwork and the heart pine floors and thought, mine. I want to be honest about what that word felt like. It felt like grief, briefly. The grief of a person who has built something beautiful and has not been able to share it with the people who were supposed to benefit from it. I had built this hotel and funded its renovation and made the decisions that kept it beautiful, and I had done all of it in silence, and the silence had been its own kind of cost. Then the guard had said my name was not on the list, and I felt the lobby differently. Not grief anymore. The specific clarifying recognition that the silence had to end, that the moment had selected itself, and that the person who was going to walk into that ballroom was the person who had stood in a house in Augusta in 1988 with $40 and had decided that her circumstances were not her destination. She was still there. She had always been there. I think about my grandmother Rose when I think about this. She owned nothing in the material sense. What she owned was the specific knowledge of what cloth can be made to do, and the specific skill to make it do that, and the relationships she had built over decades with the women who came to her. These things were hers, in a way that no one could take them. Through 40 years of practice and attention and the patience that sewing requires, I inherited her patience. I applied it differently. The same essential thing. My grandmother would have laughed at the ballroom. She would have found it wonderfully excessive. Then she would have said, "Good girl. You carried it. I carried it. I am still carrying it. Marcus is learning to carry his share. Isabel is learning to sew. The Fontaine Grande is still standing, still beautiful, still producing the specific warmth of a room that has been cared for by people who understand what care requires." I'm going back to Augusta on Monday. I have a client who has been waiting for 3 months for a specific alteration, a coat that belonged to her grandmother that she wants refitted. And because the cut is right, but the shoulders are too wide for her, and the sleeves are too long. I told her 3 months ago that I would get to it. I have been meaning to get to it. On Monday, I will get to it. I am still a seamstress. I own a hotel. Both of these things are true. The work I do with my hands is not less meaningful because I also make capital decisions about a 5-star property in the historic district of Savannah. The capital decisions are not more important because they involve larger numbers. They are different forms of the same essential practice, attention applied over time to something worth caring for. My grandmother taught me to sew because a skill is a form of security that no one can take from you. She taught me to be patient because patience over a long time produces what impatience cannot. She taught me to maintain my dignity against daily evidence to the contrary, because dignity maintained is dignity held, and dignity held is the thing that no circumstance and no guest list, and no clipboard can remove. I am 63 years old. I have 40 more years of this if I am lucky and attentive. I intend to use every one of them, mine.